Hey there. Tonight we're traveling back, not to cozy castles or candlelit feasts, but to smoke-choked hovels and frozen earth. This is winter in the Middle Ages, stripped of glory and armor. Just peasants battling months of cold, hunger, and eerie silence. Snow sifts through the roof. Bread turns to stone. Wolves creep closer. And each dawn, you rise to face it all again. If slow, earthy history helps you unwind, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if it brings you peace. Drop a comment about where you're listening and the time. There's comfort in knowing who else is out there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe flick on a fan for that soft hum. Wrap yourself in warmth. Let's begin with a season that didn't just test people, it tried to erase them. You don't need a calendar to sense winter's approach. You feel it in your bones first, stiff as yesterday's loaf. Then in the sky, bleeding from blue to a grudging gray. Finally, in the animals eyeing you with quiet suspicion, as if they know something you don't. They usually do. Autumn doesn't end, it retreats. Leaves fall, sure, but it's the wind's shift that chills you. It slithers through cottage gaps like an unwelcome guest, poking around, evicting warmth. Things quiet down. The dog stops barking at the wind and starts listening to it. That's your warning. The sun, when it bothers, feels thin, like it's forgotten how to burn. Everyone walks faster, not from haste, but because standing still hurts. Winter arrives without fanfare. No dramatic snowstorm, just silence, like debt creeping in with consequences. First comes denial. You pretend the chill is fleeting. You wear October's tunic, now with a cloak more whole than fabric, swearing you'll mend it. You won't. Not laziness. The needle's bent, thread's gone, and your fingers are too numb to hold either. We romanticize preparation, but most winters catch you mid-shore. That unmended roof corner, the unchopped wood, the garden leftovers you never stored. Still, you try. Straw stuffed in wall gaps, cloth draped over doorways, bed shoved nearer the hearth, even Uncle Gain, who reeks of sheep and sleep talks about forgotten debts. Fires aren't all-day luxuries. Wood's for evenings, cooking, and that 1 hour of forced cheer. The rest of the time? Motion, layers, and siblings huddled under scratchy blankets. The animals sense it too. Chickens clump together. Pigs go silent, unnervingly so. Cows grow irritable or stay their usual selves. Outside, dirt hardens to iron. Yesterday's mud paths are now ankle-twisting traps. The water bucket grows an ice skin you crack each dawn, cursing as it numbs your hands. The sky hangs low, gray, expectant, like it's waiting. You squint for messages in the clouds. There are none, just the promise of weeks without sun. In town, conversations shorten. Jokes dry up. Church sermons darken. The priest says cold weather is God's humility lesson. You wonder if he'd consider a warmer curriculum. Then, one morning snow. Not a blizzard, just a dusting, like flowers spilled across fields. But it changes everything. Thatch whitens. Trees stiffen. Your breath clouds. Every step crunches like parchment. Reality hits. You're locked in. No more digging, planting, growing. What's stored is all you have. Skimpy stores? Welcome to the art of thinning stew. You count in bundles now firewood, grain, turnips, eggs, few, since hens quit laying in cold. You stay busy, mending clothes, scraping pans, stirring ashes for hidden embers. Spinning wool isn't just for cloth, it keeps hands moving, minds occupied. Too much quiet, and thoughts turn dangerous. Animals aren't just livestock, they're roommates. The warmer ones come inside, boundaries exist, but barely. The house becomes a stew of smells, sounds, and shared heat. You learn to wake with goat breath on your neck. Not learn, you stop fighting it. Evenings are the worst. The sun flees early. Darkness arrives pissed off. Candles are pricey. Tallow lamps reek. You cluster near the fire, listening to stories, wind, and the wood's occasional pop. Someone tells a ghost story, fun until you realize you'll need to sprint to the freezing privy later. You run. You don't look at shadows. Yet winter isn't pure misery. There's rhythm, a bitter predictability. Chores are known. Limits are clear. And there's camaraderie and shared suffering. You savor tiny wins. 5 warm minutes, stew that tastes less like despair, a rare windless day. You celebrate quietly, cheer too loud, and someone reminds you winter's just begun. Historically, peasants fared poorly. The Little Ice Age, 14th century onward, brought harsher winters, frozen rivers, failed crops. Some years, markets were held on the Rhine's ice until it cracked. The Great Famine, 1315 to 1317, rain ruined harvests. Starvation led to whispers of cannibalism and infanticide. Not dinner talk, but then, dinner wasn't guaranteed. Winter's real test? Enduring each other. 6 family members, 3 goats, 2 chickens, and a bucket of salted fish in 20 square feet. Privacy is myth. Modesty vanishes with daylight. You avoid arguments not for patience, but because fighting stirs cold air. You shrink your world down to a few feet around the fire. You shrink your world down to a few feet around the fire. You learn the weight of every blanket, the creak of every floorboard, the rhythm of the weather like it's the pulse of some great, frozen beast. Days blur into nights, time dissolving into a thick, glacial soup. You're not living, you're enduring. Eventually, you stop asking how long winter will last. You just wake each morning and survive that single day. If you're lucky, the firewood holds out. If you're very lucky, the roof does too. Because in a medieval winter, the cold doesn't knock politely. It lets itself in and overstays its welcome like a drunken relative. And tomorrow? It starts all over again. Winter doesn't just try to kill you with cold, it murders you with chores. And at the top of that frozen to-do list? Wood. Endless, back-breaking amounts of it. This isn't about a few cozy logs for ambience. You need firewood like your lungs need air, because, quite literally, they do. Fire is your lifeline. It cooks your meals, warms your bones, dries your socks, scares off rats, and makes your home nearly mostly uninhabitable. Without it, you're not a peasant, you're a popsicle with feudal obligations. But fire doesn't magic itself into existence. It demands what cut, hauled, chopped, stacked, and cursed at with every splintered breath. Gathering firewood isn't a chore. It's a second full-time job that pays in blisters and frostbite. There are no chainsaws here. No gas-powered anything, just an axe so ancient you're not sure if it's a tool or a family heirloom. The handle's cracked, the blade's dull, but it's still better than using your bare hands. Though by the 3rd log, you'll be doing that too when the axe gets stuck. You're supposed to start in autumn. Begin early, they all say. But there's never enough time. The harvest runs late. Your neighbor borrows your axe indefinitely. You sprain your ankle fleeing an angry goose. So come December, you're swinging steel at a tree like it insulted your ancestors, praying it falls the right way. And trees? They don't cooperate. They're heavy, unpredictable bastards draped in snow. You finally fell when only to realize the real work begins chopping it, hauling it, stacking it. Repeat 50 times. Best case? Your back screams for mercy. Worst case? The tree lands on you, and you become a cautionary tale told to children. Even after chopping, the wood needs months to dry. So you burn it green, which means it smokes, hisses, and barely burns at all. Congratulations, you've turned your home into a tepid, smoky nightmare. Hope you didn't plan on breathing comfortably this season. The rich, of course, have options. They pay others to do this. Their servants trudge into the woods while they sip wine by roaring hearths. You are the servant, and your hearth is mostly a pile of damp twigs trying their best. Legally, you're often barred from gathering wood freely. Forests belong to lords. Get caught collecting kindling on noble land, and the punishment ranges from fines to beatings to becoming an example for the crime of picking up sticks. Yes, really. So peasants improvise. Peat, dried animal dung, brush bundles, they burn in the same way a rock floats. Peat gives heat, but smells like wet ashes and regret. Dung burns surprisingly well, but let's not pretend anyone's thrilled about it. Still, you gather frozen cow patties with numb fingers, pretending you're not inhaling last summer's pasture. The good news? It's free. The bad news? Your cottage now smells like a campfire hosted inside a barn. Stacking wood is an art. Too tight, and it molds. Too loose, and it collapses onto your foot. So you pile it neatly against the house, wrap it in whatever fabric you've stolen from your cousin, and pray the snow doesn't crush it. It will. And you never have enough. That's the golden rule. No matter how much you cut, it's never sufficient. By February, you're burning fence posts, chairs, anything vaguely flammable. Sentimentality? Gone. If it catches fire, it's fuel. You dream of firewood. You count logs instead of sheep. You have screaming matches over who burned the good stick too soon. You ration embers like gold. And if you find a dry branch under the snow, you carry it home like a war trophy. Sleeping is a gamble. Let the fire die, and the indoor temperature plummets to hope you wrote a will. You burrow under layers of blankets, furs, and other humans not for affection, but survival trumps personal space. In some homes, livestock joins the slumber party, not out of kindness, but necessity. Chickens provide eggs and ambient warmth. Pigs are radiators with hooves. Cows? Walking space heaters that moo. It's not cozy. It's a crowded, stinking petting zoo that's marginally better than freezing to death. Historically, communities banded together for this. Less out of camaraderie, more shared suffering. Everyone had blisters. Everyone was freezing. Everyone was equally miserable, which made it slightly easier to bear. Some regions had tricks, shared clay ovens, communal fires kept burning all day. You take turns baking bread in the village oven, side-eyeing Agnes's suspiciously warm house. Women and children gathered kindling not because it was easier, but because small fingers were deemed expendable. If you were tiny and had hands, you were sent into the woods with a basket and orders not to return empty. What you brought back might be twigs, might be pine cones, either way, you helped. Then there's the chopping itself, a medieval brand of misery. Gloves, if you had them, soaked through in minutes. Fingers numb. The axe slips. The wood splits wrong. Something hits your shin. You yell not because it helps, but because it's all you've got left. By midwinter, the ground's too hard to chop. Your hands are more splinter than skin. Half your wood piles mysteriously vanished, spoiler. Your neighbor borrowed it. Yet you persist because fire isn't optional. It's warmth, food, the line between seeing spring or becoming the reason your cottage smells worse. At night, by the fire, smoke-smudged, sore, exhausted, you feel something like peace. Not comfort, just the absence of immediate doom, which, in the Middle Ages, is as close as you'll get. Of course, some winters carve deeper scars than others. You remember the worst ones by name, like the winter of '43 when the roof caved in, or the long freeze when the river turned to stone and people tried ice skating in wooden clogs. Some didn't make it. A few froze solid. Others simply walked into the white and never returned. After a while, you stop asking questions. The firewood dwindles. The wind whistles through gaps like a vengeful spirit. You catch yourself eyeing furniture differently. That wobbly stool you always hated suddenly looks deliciously flammable. Sentimentality withers under survival's harsh glare. If it burns, it's suddenly valuable. Then comes the thaw, if you can call it that. Snow retreats like a pickpocket caught in daylight, leaving behind a world of mud so thick your boots vanish into it. But you made it. You survived another medieval winter without freezing to death, starving, or strangling your thieving cousin over that missing log. That's your victory. No parades, no medals, just frostbitten fingers, clothes that permanently smell of smoke, and the grim satisfaction of not being a human icicle. Not this year, anyway, because when dawn cracks the next morning, you do it all again. Even as spring whispers at the edges of the forest, the cold lingers like a bad guest. The chores never cease, and the fire, that fickle, flickering god, always demands more. More wood, more sweat, more of you, and you give it, because this isn't about comfort. It's about survival, one splinter at a time. Tomorrow brings the same brutal routine. Chop, stack, burn, freeze, repeat. You don't conquer winter. You outlast it. And if you're lucky, next year's axe won't snap before your spirit does. Because winter doesn't care how exhausted you are. The logs won't chop themselves. The fire won't feed itself. And warmth, that fleeting, fragile thing, must be earned anew every single damn day. You don't need a calendar to know it's winter. Your stomach announces it first, loudly, insistently. This isn't modern hunger, that polite rumble reminding you to check the fridge. This is deeper, angrier, a void that makes you stare at tree bark and seriously wonder, could I boil that into broth? Food in a medieval winter is like firewood, always insufficient, never easy to obtain, and guaranteed to spark arguments. You don't plan meals, you ration them, stretch them, perform culinary alchemy on 3 shriveled turnips, and declare it a feast. It starts with what little you've stored, mostly grains, barley, rye, oats. Wheat if you're wealthy or skilled at stealing from those who are. You keep them in sacks, barrels, anything that might deter rats. Nothing does. Rats are nature's tax collectors, furry, relentless, and armed with teeth. Most meals revolve around pottage, the medieval equivalent of a lifelong science experiment. You toss in anything remotely edible and pray it doesn't kill you. Root vegetables, dried beans, wilted greens, maybe a strip of salted pork if the saints are smiling. It simmers for days, weeks even. New ingredients get added. Old ones never truly leave. It tastes like boiled dirt with hints of onion and existential dread. You eat it daily, twice if you're fortunate, not because you enjoy it, but because it's there. And in winter, there is enough. Meat is a rare luxury. Without refrigeration, your pantry is just the cottage's least awful corner. If you slaughtered an animal in autumn, a pig, goat, or your neighbor's least favorite chicken, you preserve it with salt, smoke, or desperation. Then you hide it from everyone, especially children. Kids will eat anything, including raw bacon and the twine used to hang it. Fishing? Possible if the river isn't frozen solid, or if you haven't already burned your fishing rod for kindling. Ice fishing exists. It's just profoundly miserable. You chip through ice until your toes lose feeling, then sit contemplating life's questionable choices while waiting for a bite that may never come. Coastal folks might dry herring or smoke eel. It's nutritious. It lasts. It tastes exactly how you'd imagine. Inland, you rely on what your neighbors failed to guard properly. Bread is essential yet treacherous, made from whatever flour remains. Rye, barley, sometimes padded with sawdust or ground acorns. This isn't fluffy artisan loaf. It's a dense, jaw-testing slab that could double as a weapon. Sometimes the bread fights back. Damp storage encourages ergot fungus, a delightful mold that causes hallucinations, convulsions, and occasionally death. You don't know this. You just know the bread makes you see colors, scream at clouds, and possibly become a visionary, or a witch, depending who's watching. Dairy helps, if your animals survive. Milk spoils fast, so you churn it into butter or cheese. The cheese could be used as a building material. The butter? You hide it under your bed like gold, because in winter it is. Eggs? Unlikely. Hence slow production in cold. You might get 1 per week, 2 if you sweet-talk the hens and threaten the rooster. That single egg either goes into the pottage or you stare at it until imagination fills your stomach. Fresh produce? Adorable thought. No fruits, no greens. Maybe a dried plum from August, if it hasn't rotted or become a worm hostile. Vitamin C comes from fermented cabbage or turnips, lovingly dubbed crunchy disappointment in vinegar. It prevents scurvy but also social invitations. Preservation is everything. Salt, smoke, dry, anything that once lived or stood near something that did. Berries become jam, if you resisted eating them all during summer's sugar-starved frenzy. Herbs dangle from rafters until they tumble into soup like sad confetti. Nothing is wasted. Bones get boiled twice. Fat is saved. Even fireplace ashes end up in soap or scrubbing pots. If someone wastes food, you question their sanity or marry them for their apparent wealth. Then there's true hunger, not skipped lunch hunger, but the gnawing void where your stomach rubs against your spine. You chew slowly, not for taste, but to prolong the illusion of eating. Hunger becomes a constant companion. It watches you cook, critiques portions, eyes your neighbor's squirrel stew with interest. There's a rhythm. Wake hungry, sleep hungrier. You learn to ignore the mouse-chewing sensation in your gut until you smell a neighbor's stew and consider selling a sibling. Even the better off peasants eat poorly, just more of the same bleak meals. Occasionally, someone produces a real treat. honeycomb, an apple slice, beef the size of a coin. It's celebration, not for flavor, but for remembering life isn't always misery. Then come the lean years, crop failures like 1316's Great Famine. Heavy rains drowned fields. Rot set in. Livestock starved. Entire villages disappeared. Records tell of families vanishing, parents choosing which child gets the last crust, corpses found clutching turnips like treasure. This isn't folklore, it's history's forgotten footnotes. When food is found, the fire's often dead. So you eat cold stew by candlelight under a fur that still smells of its previous owner. And you're grateful, because at least it's food. At least you're chewing something that isn't your own lip. Meals are brief. Hunger is eternal. You scrape bowls clean, lick fingers, eye the pot contemplatively. Your body changes, movement slow, weight drops. This isn't dieting. It's still being alive. You persist, because hunger isn't crisis here, it's fact. You don't expect fullness. You just hope not to feel worse. Winter isn't a battle. It's a negotiation between you, your pantry, and the meals left until April. Holiday feasts exist only for the lucky or connected. Maybe a saved sausage for Christmas. Maybe a neighbor's mystery meat, pie eaten without questions. Even festive foods are practical. Spiced ale, if affordable, nutless, nutcakes, pies filled with dried fruit and quiet despair. They're rituals, not indulgences. Reminders that joy theoretically exists, even if crusted in soot and shared with shivering relatives. So what did you eat in a medieval winter? Anything that wouldn't eat you first. Anything preserved, hidden, or boiled into submission. You didn't dine. You survived. Because ultimately, hunger wears wool. It wraps around you. It whispers in your ear. And when spring's first green shoot appears, you don't admire it. You bite it. Your home in the Middle Ages isn't a sanctuary. It's a structural suggestion held together by wishful thinking and dried mud. Let's start with the walls. Wattle and daub if you're fortunate. Woven sticks slathered with a dubious mixture of clay, straw, and whatever else was nearby. Cow dung, human hair, yesterday's gossip. You pat it all together and pray it hardens before the next storm. Spoiler, it never does. On good days, wind whistles through the cracks like a bored minstrel. On bad days, it howls through like an angry landlord demanding rent. There's no insulation, no sealant, just the great outdoors and its slightly less hostile cousin indoors. The roof? Thatched, which sounds quaint until you realize it's just dead plants arranged in a triangular suicide pact. It leaks constantly. Rain comes in, snow piles up, birds move in and start charging sublet fees. With luck, it only partially collapses during storms. Without luck, you wake up with a chicken nesting in your hair and your ceiling in your lap. The floor is dirt, just dirt. When wet, it's a slip hazard. When frozen, it's a bone breaker. When dry, it turns to dust that invades your lungs, your food, your soul. You scatter straw for comfort, which lasts precisely 6 hours before becoming a moldy paste that smells like defeat and foot fungus. Windows? Don't be absurd. Glass is for cathedrals and people who don't reek of goat. You have holes, maybe covered with oiled parchment if you're feeling extravagant. It lets in light and every draft from here to Jerusalem. Curtains? Fabrics too precious for privacy. Doors barely close. Hinges shriek like tortured cats. You might barricade it with a log, unless you've already burned that log for warmth. Then you just hope the wind isn't feeling playful. The fireplace is the heart of the home, not in a romantic way, but in a this might kill us all way. It's a central pit with no proper chimney, just a smoke hole in the roof. So the smoke rises, slowly, filling your home with a cozy carcinogenic haze that seasons your lungs and stains your walls. After a week, you stop smelling it. You become it. Now for the furniture, what little exists. A wobbly bench, a stool that doubles as a weapon, a table if you're living large. Beds are communal affairs shared with spouses, children, and occasionally livestock. The mattress? Straw stuffed into a sack that compresses into a brick by midwinter. Your pillow is another sack, maybe filled with feathers if you're lucky, otherwise more sad straw. Blankets are wool or furs if something died recently and you were nearby. Most nights you sleep fully clothed under every textile you own, hoping body heat plus prayer equals survival. Heating this disaster is an art form. Heat rises, unfortunately, so does smoke, while you're stuck on the freezing ground. Some use heated stones, but only if fuel lasts long enough to warm them. You plug cracks with moss, mud, or fabric scraps. It doesn't work. The wind always finds a way. Light comes from tallow candles that reek of beef fat and drip like weeping sinners, or rush lights, reeds dipped in grease, that burn like angry fireflies. Their smoke mingles with the hearths until your home becomes a low-lying smog bank. Then there's the noise. Thin walls mean you hear everything. The wind's moaning, livestock flatulence, your neighbor's marital disputes, your own stomach's protest songs. Privacy is mythical. Solitude requires walking into the woods and not returning. Animals are permanent house guests. Chickens nest in corners. Goats bed down under tables. Cows live in attached sheds. Unless it's too cold, then they join the family. This slightly warms the house, while making it smell like a barn that lost a bet with a tannery. You sweep, but dirt just relocates. The straw bedding smells of sour milk. When a chicken lays an egg by your head at 3 a.m., you say thank you, and pray it doesn't defecate on your only hat. The roof hosts uninvited guests, birds, rats, insects. Come spring, you'll hear tiny feet scampering above you. Sometimes they fall through. You scream. They scream. Everyone pretends it didn't happen. Maintenance never ends. Doors warp. Beams sag. Thatched roofs mold. You fix what you can with dull knives and frayed hope. Nails are too expensive. You wedge things together with sticks and curses. When the roof leaks, you don't grab a bucket. You grab all the buckets, arranging them like a depressive game of chess. Yet there are moments, rare, fleeting, when the fire catches just right, when someone shares a fur, when a draft inexplicably stops. You pretend it's your craftsmanship. It's not. You huddle with family and pretend the stench is comforting. It's not, but it's familiar. Some wealthier peasants whitewash walls, not for aesthetics, but because lime kills lice. You consider it, collect the lime, then use it to patch the wall where the goat kicked through. Herbs hang from rafters to mask smells. They crumble into your soup, which you eat anyway, calling it seasoning. Sometimes you dream of a second room, a wooden floor, a roof that doesn't threaten mutiny with every breeze. You don't expect it. You just let the fantasy sit with you as you stitch another patch onto the wall, listening to rain drip through the ceiling. Because ultimately, your house isn't warm. It isn't dry. It isn't peaceful, but it's still standing. And in a medieval winter, that's the closest you'll get to luxury. It's dawn, or something pretending to be dawn. A faint light bleeds through the parchment window that might be sunrise, or might just be the moon giving up. Either way, it's time to move. Not because you're rested, you're not. Not because you're eager, absolutely not. But because your life depends on outrunning frostbite, famine, and your neighbors go to the water source first. There are no weekends here. No me time. There's barely time to scrape the ice off your eyelashes before the day's brutal ballet begins. Every morning is a carbon copy of the last. Gather, mend, feed, haul, boil, patch, repeat. Winter in medieval Europe isn't a season. It's a to-do list written in chilblains and exhaustion. First order of business, resurrect the fire. You cradle last night's embers like a sick child, blowing gently until your vision spots. If they've died, it's back to flint and steel, hunched over kindling with fingers so numb they might as well be sausages. What is currency here? A good fire means warmth, food, light, life itself. A bad one means watching all those things slip away while pretending the smoke in your eyes is why you're crying. Next, water. The bucket weighs more than your will to live. The stream is half frozen, the path an ice rink designed by Satan himself. You fall, you spill, you curse the ice, the bucket, and the cosmic joke that is winter. Then you do it again because water doesn't fetch itself. Back home, you boil it, not for health, but because drinking it straight might finish what the cold started. Animals come next. They eat before you do. The chickens glare like you've personally offended them. The pig screams as if you're late for an appointment. The cow judges you silently while chewing something that might have been your last good rag. You scrape together frostbitten turnip tops, kitchen scraps, and whatever hasn't frozen into weapon-grade projectiles. You check for eggs. There are none, while the rooster critiques your life choices. If it snowed overnight, you shovel, not for neatness, but because falling into a snowdrift while carrying pig slop is the kind of core memory no one needs. You use a warped plank, hands wrapped in rags, muttering words that would get you excommunicated if anyone heard. Breakfast? If you can call it that. Yesterday's pottage reheated with today's regrets. Maybe some bread resembling fossilized bark. You scrape the pot like an archaeologist hunting the last edible molecule. No one complains. Complaining burns calories. Then the real work begins. For men, fields, forests, forges. For women, everything else. Spinning wool until your hands cramp into claws. Mending clothes that were threadbare in autumn. Hauling water that always sloshes onto your frozen feet. Cooking meals that defy the term food. Watching 6 children while pretending your back isn't screaming. Laundry happens weekly, a special circle of hell. You break ice at the river's edge, scrub with lye that eats your knuckles raw, then watch the fabric freeze into armor before hauling it home. Cooking is creative despair. You stir the eternal pot, skim off mold, add more water, maybe toss in a pebble for texture. Serve hot and call it soup. Afternoons are for fixing what broke yesterday. Tools, fences, relationships strained over who stole the last turnip. You sharpen blades on a whetstone older than your grandfather, who died falling off the same ladder you're now using to patch the roof. Children help by mostly getting underfoot, though even toddlers have jobs, scaring crows, holding yarn, carrying kindling bundles smaller than their heads. Inside, the spinning wheel's whine is the soundtrack of your existence. Wool doesn't spin itself. Linen doesn't weave itself. Every thread in your tunic passed through fingers that ache like they've been beaten. Gloves are for the rich. Calluses are your true gloves. When dusk comes, which it does suspiciously early, you rush to finish by dying light. Patch walls with mud that freezes before setting. Rehang doors that sag like drunkards. Fix roofs with straw and delusional optimism. Dinner is the same as breakfast, but darker. You eat fast. The warmth fades quicker than your hopes. Afterward, there's no rest, just more spinning, mending, scraping soot that gets everywhere like pessimistic snow. Children collapse near the fire in a tangle of limbs and snores. Adults stay up not for leisure, but because the fire needs feeding and tomorrow's wood won't chop itself. If you're lucky, someone sings, not joyfully, but persistently, like a heartbeat. When you finally sleep, it's in the same clothes, on the same lumpy straw, under a blanket that smells of wet dog and resignation. The wind rattles the shutters. The goat farts in its sleep. You wonder if the roof will hold. You wonder if tomorrow might be warmer. You don't wonder long. Exhaustion is the only lullaby you can afford. You don't choose to get sick in the Middle Ages. Winter chooses for you. One morning you wake with a nose that won't stop running, a throat lined with pine cones, and joints swollen like overripe fruit. Congratulations. You're now host to something with no name, no cure, and absolutely no bedside manner. Your cottage has been incubating this since October. Damp walls, frigid air, and a fireplace that belches smoke like a dragon with indigestion. You've been breathing in equal parts goat dander, mold spores, and your uncle's questionable stew fumes. Germ theory won't exist for centuries, but your body knows. And it's currently throwing the medieval equivalent of a tavern brawl. Everyone coughs. Everyone sneezes. No one covers their mouths because handkerchiefs are for nobles, and the concept of patient zero is blissfully unknown. The children are snotty messes. The elderly rattle with each breath. Even the livestock seem to be judging you between their own wheezes. You cling to survival by drinking nettle tea that smells like swamp water and praying the stench alone doesn't finish you off. Enter the remedies. First up, bloodletting, the medieval cure-all. Someone arrives with a knife duller than your will to live, or a leech that looks suspiciously bored. The theory? Fever stems from bad blood. The reality? You're now lightheaded from blood loss, but too weak to protest. Next, herbal concoctions brewed from whatever the village healer scraped together before the snows came. Yarrow, wormwood, suspicious moss, all boiled in a cracked pot and strained through your least filthy sleeve. It tastes like dirt and betrayal, but you choke it down because desperation outweighs dignity. Sometimes they prescribe fasting, because clearly, what a body fighting infection needs is fewer calories. You're already rationing turnip peels, so spiritual purification just means admitting the pantry's empty. Other classics include steam inhalation from the same pot you boiled socks in. Prayer, the longer the better. Pressing hot coals to skin to draw out poison. Spoiler, it draws out screams. Medical help depends entirely on who shows up. The village healer? Maybe a poultice and vague blessings. The priest? Holy water and reminders this is probably your fault. The barber surgeon? Start dictating your will. His tools haven't seen soap since the last plague. He'll examine your gangrenous leg, mutter about humoral imbalance, then reach for a saw and tankard a veil. Your anesthesia? Biting a stick and contemplating life choices. Sometimes they purge you, up or down, depending which end offends them most. Laxatives made from boiled bark. Emetics brewed from wine and regret. Soon you're not just sick, you're violently, aggressively ill, questioning why you bothered surviving this long. Yet some recover. You spend days sweating through wool blankets, vacillating between chills and hallucinations. The fire sputters. The air reeks of wet sheep and herbal nightmares. And somehow, through luck, stubbornness, or the sheer spite of your ancestors, you pull through. But not everyone's so fortunate. Illness spreads like gossip in these cramped, smoky boxes. You cough. Your child coughs. Your neighbor coughs through the wall. Within days, half the village is wheezing under moth-eaten blankets, sipping onion broth between last rites. No one knows the cause, so speculation runs wild. Bad air? A curse? Old Maud's evil eye after you didn't share your last apple? Superstition and desperation intertwine until you're hanging garlic over doorways, burning sage that smells like regret, and sleeping with iron under the mattress. It doesn't work, but at least it masks the goat stench. The cruelest twist? You can't stop working. The firewood won't chop itself. The cow won't self-milk. Your children still expect food, even if it's just hope soup with nettle garnish. Rest is a luxury for corpses and lords. So you stagger outside, wrapped in every scrap of wool you own, shuffling through snow like a disgruntled ghost. And always, the fear lingers. What if this isn't just a cold? What if it's typhoid? Pneumonia? The kind of illness that doesn't announce itself, just takes you quietly in the night. When the worst comes, the signs are unmistakable. The fever spikes like a vengeful god. Your breath rattles like a broken bellows. You stop rising from bed. Someone drapes a damp cloth on your forehead, a meaningless gesture that brings no comfort. The priest is summoned, not the healer, not the surgeon. Just the man in robes who speaks Latin like a death sentence. Confession happens fast. You list every sin you remember, plus a few extras, just in case. The priest nods, sprinkles musty holy water, and says words you don't understand but sound final. Your family gathers. No one says the obvious. They just save bread, tighten blankets, and exchange glances heavy with unspoken calculations. There's a moment, just one, when you lock eyes with your spouse and realize neither knows who'll survive this winter. But sometimes, mercifully, the fever breaks. You wake to embers still glowing. Your breath doesn't rattle. Your fingers obey. The room still smells like death's waiting room, but at least it's warm. Recovery isn't triumphant. It's shaky legs and hollow hunger. That first trip outside feels like crossing a glacier on stilts. No one cheers. You just pick up where you left off, chopping wood, mending fences, eyeing the suspiciously bloated pig. Your voice may crack. You may have lost weight, less strain on your shoes. They joke weakly. But you're alive. For now. Because illness never truly leaves. It lurks in corners, in shared cups, in unwashed rags. Health is a fleeting visitor in this world, never a resident. You cough less. You breathe easier. The nightmares fade. And then, because this is the Middle Ages, you haul water, mend the roof, feed the goats. As if nothing happened. No one speaks of your survival. No one celebrates. You just wake, pull on your patched tunic, and begin again. Because here, staying alive is the only proof you were strong enough. And even that, in winters like these, feels like a minor miracle. Authority in medieval Europe wasn't a polite suggestion. It was the iron fist inside a frozen leather glove. And in winter's cruel depths, when hunger sharpened tempers and desperation lingered like a bad smell, obedience wasn't just expected. It was enforced with the subtlety of a mace to the skull. You don't argue. You don't complain. You don't ask, why? Unless you enjoy the taste of splintered wood and public humiliation. From the manor lord to the village priest, every figure above you in this miserable hierarchy demands instant submission. And they've all got belts, staffs, or scripture verses ready to remind you. Let's start with the lord of the manor. He owns the land you're squatting on like a tolerated fungus. You till his fields, pay his taxes, and bow when he rides past. Even if your spine already feels like shattered pottery. If he says, jump, you ask, how high midair, just in case it was a rhetorical question. Resist? That's adorable. Let's see how funny that is when he confiscates your grain, throws you in the stocks during a blizzard, or, if he's feeling creative, makes you stand barefoot in the frozen pigsty. Ah, the stocks, winter's least comfortable seating arrangement. Wooden planks clamp your neck and wrists while neighbors admire your life choices. It's cold. It's humiliating. And if the village children are feeling festive, they might pelt you with turnips, if you're lucky, or rocks, if you're not. You don't protest. That might earn you a second round. But lords aren't your only problem. The church wields power that makes nobles look like amateurs. God might forgive sins, but Father Thomas? Not so much. He watches everything. Who skips mass, who works on holy days, who might be coveting their neighbor's last scraggly goat. And he keeps records, not for spiritual guidance, but for leverage. One wrong word and suddenly you're accused of blasphemy, witchcraft, or the ultimate crime, forgetting to tithe. Speaking of tithing, it's not optional. 1/10 of everything you produce goes to the church, even if that leaves your children gnawing on boiled bark. Grain, eggs, chickens, your last shred of dignity. The church takes its cut. Fall short? No friendly reminder. Just a public shaming sermon complete with ominous stares and threats of eternal damnation. The priest's power isn't brute force, it's memory. He remembers who dozed during homilies, who whispered during prayers, who dared ask why Lent means 6 weeks of eating weeds. And in winter, when everyone's starving and coughing, it takes nothing to land in his crosshairs. Then there's the law, or whatever passes for it in your village. The constable is usually just a farmer with a club and a superiority complex. Justice is less about fairness and more about keeping the rabble in line. Steal bread? Lose a hand. Mock a noble? Lose your tongue. Gossip too loudly? Enjoy your new iron muzzle. The charming scold's bridle, designed to shut you up permanently. Even private matters become public spectacles. Your child misbehaves? You're beaten. Your spouse curses? You both get whipped. Discipline is a community event. The whipping post doesn't care whose fault it was, just that someone bleeds. Don't get clever, either. Literacy is suspicious. Curiosity is dangerous. Ask too many questions and suddenly you're not thoughtful. You're a sorcerer. The punishment? A free swim test, weighted, or a complimentary bonfire. For women, the rules are tighter. You obey your father, then your husband, then your eldest son, in that exact order. Speak softly, work constantly, and never, never give anyone reason to point at you and whisper which. Because once that word is airborne, it doesn't matter if you were just healing with herbs or refusing some drunkard's advances. The outcome's the same, kindling and screams. And your neighbors? They're not bystanders. They're part of the machine. That sweet old lady who gave you soup last summer? She'll report you for working on Saint whoever's feast day. Your cousin who borrowed your axe? He'll casually mention you muttered something unholy in your sleep. Surveillance isn't some abstract threat. It's the woman who counts how often you go to confession, the man who notes when your candle burns too late, the children who repeat your jokes at the wrong moment. Winter sharpens the suppression. Long nights breed long grudges. A stolen tool, a bad trade, a missing chicken. Any slight can snowball into accusations that leave you shivering in the stocks or worse. There's no appeal, no real justice. Just the hope your lord's in a good mood and the priest didn't stub his toe on the altar this morning. Even humor is dangerous. Laugh at the Lord's joke? Fine. Chuckle at the priest's sermon? Acceptable. Smirk at someone in the stocks? Encouraged. But laugh at the wrong thing? Suddenly you're seditious. Winter makes punishments crueler. A slap in summer stings. In winter, with chapped skin and broken spirit, it lingers for days. There's no ointment, just snow and silence to soothe the bruise. There are no village meetings to air grievances. No petitions for fairness. Just orders from above and obedience from below. Question why Father Thomas gets extra rations every Friday. That's how you end up digging graves in February, possibly your own. Even animals get better treatment if they're useful. A healthy ox is more valuable than a sick peasant. A milk-giving goat eats before you do. Your worth is measured in labor and compliance, never in thoughts. Stay in your place. Stay quiet. Stay useful. That's the unwritten law. And winter writes it in frostbite. Yet people adapt. They learn to bow without breaking. They master the art of yes with their lips and never with their eyes. Obedience becomes performance, part survival tactic, part silent rebellion. Children learn early. They're taught not just to work, but to perform deference, how to address the Lord, avoid the priest's gaze, sit still during Mass while old Margaret snores through the homily. You don't teach them to dream big. You teach them to stay small, unnoticed, alive. Religion, the supposed comfort, becomes another chain. Weekly, you're reminded. Obedience brings salvation. Questions lead to hell. God is always watching, and so is Father Thomas, who seems oddly fixated on how deeply you kneel. Nights are quiet, not peaceful, but heavy. You listen to the fire crackle, the wind moan, the occasional footsteps of someone stumbling home from the tavern. You lie wrapped in wool and fear, thinking how submission kept you alive today. Not happy, not free, just alive. Tomorrow you'll wake and obey again, not from belief, but because survival depends on it. The price of winter isn't just cold and hunger. It's your voice, your will, your very thoughts. Because in the medieval winter, defiance freezes faster than blood. So you pull on your boots, lower your eyes, and keep moving. After all, you don't question the cold. You don't question the rules. You just survive them. You're never truly alone in the medieval winter, and that's not some comforting thought about community. It's the chilling realization that something is always watching from the tree line. It's breath fogging in the moonlight. It's hunger sharper than your rusted sickle. Wolves are the obvious threat. By December, they're desperate. By January, they're bold. They slink along the forest's edge, noses lifted to catch the scent of your smoke, your livestock, your unwashed skin. When you trek alone to gather firewood or empty the slop bucket, you feel their eyes on your back. They rarely attack outright, but you've all heard the stories. How they wait until you slip on ice. How they circle when your lantern gutters out. How their howls sound almost like laughter when the wind is right. But wolves are just the beginning. Rats don't hibernate. They've moved in. Thank you very much. Nesting in your barley sacks, skittering under straw beds, gnawing through anything remotely edible and half the things that aren't. At night, you hear them, the scritch-scratch of claws, The ominous gnawing, the occasional shriek when someone rolls onto a tail. They devour grain, leather, soap. They chew boot laces, belt straps, the covers of the village's loan Bible. If it can be nibbled, it will be. And when supplies run dangerously low, rats stop being pests. They become a moral dilemma wearing fur. Cats help, if you're lucky enough to have one. A good Mauser in winter is worth 3 children, and they know it. They strut through your cottage like tiny tyrants, demanding warmth and worship in exchange for half-hearted rodent patrol. When they can't be bothered, the rats resume their midnight feasts. You wake to find your last sausage missing a corner, your bread studded with tiny teeth marks, your flour bin decorated with droppings like some vile seasoning. Dogs pose their own threats. Not the loyal hearthhounds, the strays. Half-wild creatures with ribs poking through mangy fur, abandoned when food grew scarce. They roam in 2s and 3s, sniffing at doorways, chasing chickens, occasionally cornering someone too slow at the latch. You don't trust them. They don't trust you. Their barks at phantoms make you jump, but it's the silence that follows that chills your blood. The woods whisper of worse things. Lynxes, rare but lethal, that vanish before you're sure they were real. Boars, ill-tempered battering rams with tusks like daggers, that don't hunt you, but might gore you for looking at them wrong. Hunt them for meat? Some try. Some come back with dinner. Some don't come back at all. Then there's what the cold drives indoors. Spiders fat as coins. Beetles that crunch underfoot. Centipedes that slither between floorboards. You sweep them into the fire and pretend not to shudder. Food storage becomes a battle. That smoked ham hanging from the rafters? A magnet for teeth and claws. Cheese wrapped in cloth? A challenge for determined jaws. Even the family dog, if you have one, stares at the larder like it's the gateway to paradise. Some hang food high. Some bury it. Some sleep with arms wrapped around sacks like lovers. It doesn't matter. Winter is the great equalizer. Everything wants what you have. Birds grow bold too. Crows gather on fences, watching with beady eyes. You tell yourself it's superstition, until you notice 3 perched above your door, still as sentinels, and wonder what they know that you don't. Winter sharpens the senses. Sound carries farther. Footsteps and snow crunch like bones. When you hear something outside, a snapped branch, a low growl, the rhythmic thud of approaching boots, your heart doesn't race. It seizes, because sometimes it's not an animal. Sometimes it's a man, hungrier than a wolf, more desperate than you. Bandits don't take winters off. Cold and starvation make them reckless. If they think your family is food, they'll try the door. They'll break it. That's why you sleep with a blade within reach, dull, rusted, but sharp enough to give you a fighting chance. You pray you never need it. So every noise becomes a question. Is that just the wind? Or something testing the latch? You learn winter's language. The way snow drifts differently when something's passed through. The silence that means you're being watched. The particular creak of a branch that says run. You listen differently. You think differently. You start counting food in days, not portions. You tuck hands under arms at every pause, not for warmth, but because frostbite doesn't ask permission. The church says God watches over you, but God doesn't guard chicken coops. He doesn't chase rats from grain bins. He doesn't leave paw prints just beyond your threshold. So you check the locks. You double knot the rope. You leave the fire burning low and the knife where you can grab it. And when you sleep, it's the light, twitchy rest of prey, half dreaming, half listening. Because winter isn't just cold. It's alive. It's hungry. And it's always waiting. Mornings begin with track checking, not curiosity, but necessity. A line of paw prints across the garden means a visitor. Foxes near the henhouse? Manageable. Something bigger? You shovel snow extra hard, erasing paths, making your home look less tempting. Some hang charms over doors. A twist of rowan. A wolf's tooth. A bundle of sage gone dusty. Do they work? Who knows? But no one risks taking them down. Your dreams turn strange. Teeth. Eyes. Heavy footsteps. You wake gasping, sweat freezing instantly, and listen, really listen, for that one sound that doesn't belong. Because in the medieval winter, survival isn't just enduring cold. It's staying off the menu. Every shadow could be a wolf. Every creak could be a thief. Every decision could be your last. You don't beat winter. You don't outsmart it. You just hope it picks someone else tonight. When hunger gnaws through your last belt hole and the roof leaks more than it shelters, there's only one place left to turn: the medieval church, which alternates between salvation and extortion depending on the day. Religion wasn't optional in the Middle Ages. It was the scaffolding holding up your crumbling existence. Especially in winter, when death lingered closer than your own shadow, the church didn't just offer comfort, it issued commandments written in frost and fear. You didn't merely believe in God. You structured your life around his ever-watching, perpetually disappointed gaze. The village church wasn't a sanctuary, it was a stone-cold cavern where you huddled shoulder to shoulder with your neighbors, trying not to shiver loud enough to be accused of weak faith, while the priest, wrapped in layers of wool and divine authority, droned Latin nobody understood. But you nodded along anyway, because comprehension mattered less than compliance. Mass didn't cancel for weather. If the river froze, you crossed it. If your child coughed up blood, you bundled them up and brought them along. Missing service wasn't just frowned upon, it was noted by the priest, gossiped about by old widow Agnes, and potentially blamed for the next hailstorm. And then there was tithing. The holy taxman always got his cut. 10% of everything you produced, even if that meant your children's portion shrank to nothing. Grain, eggs, livestock, the last shreds of your dignity, the church took its share with a smile and a reminder about heavenly rewards. Winter turned religion into survival theater. Every problem had a saint. Sick cow? Pray to St. Eligius. Frostbitten fingers? Try St. Polycarp. Lost your axe through the ice? St. Anthony might care. Lost your mind surviving January? That's just Tuesday. Relics were the medieval equivalent of emergency flares, bones of martyrs, splinters of the true cross, handkerchiefs that allegedly touched a saint centuries ago. People trudged miles through snow to kiss a glass-encased knucklebone, whispering desperate prayers. Not because they fully believed, but because they'd run out of options. Miracles were theoretically possible. Your fever might break. Your crops might sprout. Your pig might stop seeing demons. And if none of that happened, clearly you didn't pray hard enough, or forgot to confess that time you ate bacon on a fast day. Confession was its own winter ritual. You'd kneel in a freezing wooden booth, knees popping, listing sins to a priest who'd heard it all before. Stole turnips? Check. Cursed your neighbor? Obviously. That one impure thought about the miller's wife? God's already furious. Penance issued, you'd emerge feeling lighter for approximately 5 minutes until guilt crept back like the cold through your boots. Then came fasting, the church's cruel joke. Advent, Lent, Saints' Days, all demanding you give up meat, eggs, or dairy in the depths of winter when you hadn't tasted protein in months. You'd stare at your feast of boiled weeds and call it spiritual growth while your stomach growled like an angry bear. But you didn't dare question it. The church owned land, controlled time, and collected debts. It whispered no, shouted that every privation endured now would be repaid in a heaven with golden streets and no frostbite. And if you slipped up, eternal fire awaited, not metaphorical fire, but the real, screaming, flesh-melting kind. Even the weather was a sermon. Sudden blizzard? God's wrath. Mild spell? God's mercy. Frozen crops? Someone's secret sin. This turned villages into pressure cookers of paranoia. The widow who muttered during prayers. The man who worked on Sundays. The child who asked too many questions. And he could be the reason the milk soured. Gossip spread like ice across a pond. Meanwhile, the priest lived better than you. Not luxuriously, but noticeably. He had wine, actual wine, a private chamber, maybe even a feather pillow. He preached that suffering purified the soul, convenient when his hands weren't cracked from chopping firewood. Yet people clung to faith because the alternative was unbearable. In a world where children died from coughs and neighbors vanished under snowdrifts, heaven was the only consolation. If this life was nothing but hunger and cold, surely the next would be better. No rats, no lords, no endless winter. You carved crosses into door frames. You whispered rosaries in the dark. You tied charms to your belt. Saints for protection, saints for sleep, saints for surviving till dawn. Every ritual was a tiny rebellion against despair. When someone died, as they often did in winter, the church presided over the frozen tragedy. Graves had to be hacked out of iron-hard earth or left shallow for spring. The priest would mumble Latin over a shroud stiff with ice, incense freezing mid-swing as the living buried the dead with numb hands and emptier hearts. Sometimes bodies couldn't be moved. Services happened in barns or beside the hearth, families huddled around the wrapped corpse, praying it wouldn't attract wolves before the ground thawed. The church had answers for this too. Death was a passage. The cold couldn't follow you into paradise. The hunger would end if you obeyed, if you believed. So even in the worst moments, kneeling in a church so cold your breath fogged the hymn book, confessing sins just to feel some control, praying to a saint whose name you mispronounced, you kept going. Because faith in winter wasn't about salvation. It was about surviving tomorrow. There's a cruel lie people tell about winter, that it ends neatly in March, that spring arrives like some punctual servant with birdsong and blossoms. But in the Middle Ages, winter didn't consult calendars. It lingered like a bad debt, stretching into April, May, sometimes even June with its icy fingers. When the thaw finally comes, it isn't some glorious rebirth. Snow retreats sullenly, leaving behind a world of mud so thick it swallows boots whole. The trees remain skeletal. The wind still bites. The sun, when it appears, feels like a distant, disinterested god. You don't celebrate. You survey the damage. What winter didn't freeze, it starved. What it didn't starve, it broke. Bones, tools, spirits. You walk into the village and find doors still shut, chimneys cold, no smoke, no footprints, just that particular silence that means a family didn't make it. Maybe it was old Tom with his cough. Maybe the widow who gave her bread to the children. Maybe the little girl who faded away in February like a candle snuffed by the wind. Funerals are quiet affairs, if they happen at all. The graveyard's been busy. Frozen ground made proper burials impossible for months, so some bodies waited in barns or caves, wrapped in shrouds that did little to mask the sweet rot stench. You dig now, hacking at half-thawed earth, lowering neighbors who've been dead since Christmas died. No hymns, no eulogies, just the sound of dirt hitting linen. Those who survived aren't much better off. You're thinner, quieter, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. Children who should be laughing just stare at their hands. Women stop singing at the loom. Men sharpen tools with a little too much focus. And the hunger doesn't magically end. Your stores are empty. Your livestock are walking skeletons. The fields won't yield for months yet. So you keep boiling the same tough roots, baking the same sawdust bread, praying the next frost doesn't come. Work piles up. Winter broke everything. Fences lean like drunkards. Roofs gape with missing thatch. Plows rusted under snowdrifts. You mend what you can with frost-swollen fingers, planting seeds in ground that feels like it might never warm again. Every cough from your child sends your heart racing. Every cloud looks like it could bring hail. Records from the time, where they exist, speak in omissions. Parish registers list burials, but not causes. Chronicles mention unusual mortality, but not the way a village of 60 became 40, or how 10-year-olds looked 30, or how women miscarried from cold alone. What we know is this: medieval winter wasn't something you got through. It was something that left its mark on you, like a brand. You wake screaming from dreams of being chased through snow. You flinch at sudden winds. You hoard crust long after the harvest comes in. The church calls it purification through suffering. You call it learning to live with ghosts. Spring doesn't erase anything. It just buries the worst under new chores and thinner shadows. When the snow melts, it reveals things lost months ago. A child's doll, frozen in a ditch. A rusted knife near the woodpile. Your brother's hat, right where he fell. You pick them up gently. You don't speak of them. Eventually, weeks later, when the ground softens, you hear laughter again. Not the easy kind from before winter, but the careful, fragile sort that knows its place. Someone plays a flute with half the notes missing. A girl chases a chicken through the yard. The pot bubbles with something almost resembling soup. It isn't joy. Not yet. But it's motion. And after the stillness of winter, that's enough. You plant earlier this year. You store more. You tell yourself you'll be ready. But deep down, you know next winter could always be worse. It's just a matter of when. So you live with the scars. You work the fields. You count your blessings in quiet, practical terms. The baby survived. The roof only half collapsed. You still have both feet. When someone asks how your winter was, you just nod. We made it. Because that's all anyone ever says. The rest, the hunger dreams, the frozen corpse of the neighbor's boy, the way you still wake certain you hear wolves, that stays tucked away with the last turnip seeds. You walk past the churchyard without looking. You see the first green shoot and feel the old grief. You wipe your hands on your apron and start mending the fishing net. Because survival wasn't triumph. It wasn't victory. It was just being here when the snow finally quit. And in the Middle Ages, that was miracle enough. You don't measure survival in seasons, you measure it in scars. The white line across your palm from splitting frozen wood. The cough that never quite left after the fever winter. The way you startle at wolf howls even in July. These are your medals, your trophies, the only proof you outlasted the cold's relentless siege. Spring doesn't heal. It just gives you different battles. The same hands that fought frost now claw at stubborn soil. Thatched roofs need reweaving with new straw. Fences demand straightening after snow's crushing weight. Every task whispers of winter's return. Mend this tighter, store that fuller, pray harder this time. The children should be laughing as they chase butterflies. Instead, they're quiet, hollow-eyed, flinching when the wind picks up. They've learned what no child should know, that full bellies aren't guaranteed, that fire can die, that some mornings people don't wake up. You catch them staring at the last turnip like it might vanish. Villages where their loss is openly. The empty house where the miller's family lived. The abandoned loom in the corner. The extra space at supper no one mentions. You don't speak of those who didn't make it, not because you've forgotten, but because remembering hurts like pressing on frostbite. Yet life pushes forward with stubborn persistence. You plant seeds in earth that still smells like iron. You laugh short, sharp barks that surprise even you. The first time fresh bread appears after months of hardtack, you almost weep at the smell. This is the truth they don't write in chronicles. Survival isn't an ending. It's just the pause between winters. You don't rebuild, you reinforce. Every repair, every stored sack of grain, every newborn lamb is armor against the cold you know will come again. The scars remain. The memories linger. But so do you. And for now, that has to be enough.